Hey, folks. It's a brand new day. It is May 8th,
May.
and we have a pope. Wow. Wow.
What do you have to say about the Pope? I don't even really actually know what a Pope is. I just know what they are. Oh, here we go. Here's my phone that I didn't turn down. I know that they're the leader of the Catholic Church, but like, why? That's my question.
I don't understand. I don't even understand the question. What do you mean, why?
What is the Pope? Like, why is it called the Pope?
He's the Holy Father. He's the head of the heads of the heads.
Yeah, but why is it called the Pope?
That is a good question I don't know the answer to.
It's just an interesting name.
Pope.
Anyway,
do you know anything about the new Pope? We're Protestant, by the way. I don't know if you could tell from Bailey's ignorance about the Pope.
Well, okay, so he creates new doctrine, right?
No.
That's one thing he does.
No.
Right?
No.
Does it ex cathedra, right?
When he speaks ex cathedra,
right? That's
what
when he creates
says
new doctrine,
is
right?
infallible.
Right.
It's the way I gather it as a Protestant is that it's supposed to be
like a modern day prophet.
No.
Oh.
No.
I'm in a funny mood today.
Codifying tradition. So let's say the assumption of Mary. Well, we've known for forever that Mary was assumed, and now I'm just going to say that this doctrine is now part of the... And so every time they clarify doctrine, that clarification is infallible. It is the church's teaching. But, ideally, it is supposed to have gone back through the ages of tradition and have always been the church's teaching, just clarified.
Right. Hey, Blue Phoenix says, man, I would love to stay for the live stream, but I got to go to bed.
Oh,
so I'll
Blue
watch
Phoenix.
the video tomorrow. But may God bless your live stream and pay you guys, and I pray you guys are living a blessed life.
I feel blessed. I feel blessed because you left that comment, gentlemen.
I feel blessed just because I can make fun of you on a live stream right now.
All right. Anyway, the new Pope is an American.
Okay, so does that mean that the Pope's office is in America?
No, that now means that the United States is the best nation on earth.
I thought it already was.
That is, well, now it's infallible.
Oh, gotcha. That's going to be codified. Okay. So wait, so the Pope is like, yeah, I'm so ignorant. The Pope is in America now. No. He is American, but he lives in...
He was born in Chicago.
Poland?
No, in Italy.
Oh, okay.
The Vatican City is its own country inside of Italy.
And so he has to live there.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't live there before.
Well, he was a cardinal, so he might have done. But now he's the Pope, so yeah, he's going to live there. And I was like, man, I was thinking about J.D. Vance. I was like, man, he's got to move all his wife and his family and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, wait, Catholic priests are celibate. It's just him.
Oh. Well, that makes things easier.
Yeah, it makes things a lot easier. Yeah, and then it was like, there was this thing on it, and it was like, he went to Peru for a little bit as a missionary, and then he went here, and then he went there. And I was like, man, that must have been hard on his family. Oh, wait.
Speaking of a topic that comes up a lot with us is a lot of people think the Pope's Antichrist. Like, that's a popular thing where in the deep, more conspiratory rabbit holes.
Right. Yeah. I think that's been around
for a long time. Like the Vatican
probably before Martin Luther.
The Vatican's the beast or something.
Yep. Mm-hmm. The woman. It's either the woman who rides the beast or it's the beast. I think one of there's a very popular book. It's called The Two Babylons.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I think in that book...
Or like Twin Babylons or something?
In that book, and then there's another book called The Woman Rides the Beast. And I think that the Vatican, the Roman Catholic Church, is made out to be the woman who rides the beast. So the beast is the nation that the Antichrist assembles, or the League of Nations that the Antichrist assembles. And somehow they pay allegiance to the Roman Catholic Church, or the Roman Catholic Church rules over them or has its fingers meddled in all the nations.
Is there evidence for that? Like,
no. I mean, just basically anti-Catholic prejudice and hatred, you know. Which, when you read that book, the two Babylons or whatever it is, it kind of is just shameless anti-Catholic. So stuff like this, I was so mad because I'm oriented morally very strongly. Like I do a lot of work to keep my conscience clean. So when around Christmas time a couple years ago, when people were like, Christmas trees are pagan, you got to get them out of your house.
Oh, right.
I freaked out internally. I was like, listen, I might have to throw my Christmas tree away in front of my kids. Like, if it's pagan, if it's a sin, I don't want it in my house. So I did this whole thing, and I figured it out. And the conclusion was Christmas trees turned up after the Reformation in Germany, where the Reformation was the strongest. So there's this whole story that people tell of like, oh, this is what the Catholic Church does everywhere it goes. It goes into these pagan lands and it waters down the gospel to make it amenable to pagan people, and it just assumes all of their practices into the Catholic liturgy, and all their gods become saints and blah, 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 blah. But with the Christmas tree, that just factually is not true. There is no evidence whatsoever that happened in any way. The first Christmas trees appeared in Protestant Germany. Yeah. It's a ridiculous claim. There's no historical foundation for it at all. But that's the point of like this kind of story that people love to tell about the Catholic Church and how corrupt it is and how it's shifty and it weaves its way into, and it has subsumed all these pagan things.
I feel like that's the unfortunate part, and like why people who talk about eschatology get a bad rap. It's like, eschatology is biblical. Like, right? You're talking about an aspect of the Bible, and when people hear and I think it's due in part to just people that haven't spent enough time with it and then teach it. Where it's like, oh gosh, this connects to this and this connects to this, and I have this string, and it's like you're locked down in your bunker, and you have the pegboard with all of the clues.
G.K. Chesterton, I just told this to our friend Nathan the other day. G.K. Chesterton has this quote where he says, oh gosh, it's something. I mean, he's one of the greatest writers of the 20th century. So I wish that I could remember how he said it exactly, but it was something like, the crazy man doesn't go crazy trying to build a castle in the sky. The crazy man goes crazy trying to separate out each piece of sand. And his point basically was, the crazy man doesn't go crazy trying to look at the big picture. The crazy man goes crazy because everything in his life is inside of a box. And he cannot look outside of that box. Inside of the box, everything is locked tight and it makes sense. You think of like, his example was like a schizophrenic person. Like, everyone's looking at me. The mailman was looking at me. You know, I see this car drive past every single day at the same time every single day. You know, and maybe it's just a guy who is very dedicated to his routine, and he drives that route to go to work every single day. You know, But the crazy man is so focused on the details that he can't think of another interpretation for them, and that's where your insanity comes from.
Yeah.
And I think it can be the same way for eschatology, is people get so focused on the details that they can't think outside of the box to look at another view, which is one of the reasons why we're friends. And one of the things I think is our greatest strength is we love to listen to the other ideas and basically be like, okay, like I could be wrong.
We were just talking about that with Gavin Ortlund. Yeah. Who is a partial preterist, right? Mm-hmm. And a Calvinist. Mm-hmm. And
Anabaptist.
We're neither of those things.
Strongly.
But it's like, why do we I love Gavin Orland.
It's his spirit.
Yeah.
It's his gentle spirit.
And I think that's the point. And what we have been talking about a lot, which is like, okay, we're so obsessed in the West with facts and regulations and all of these things that we're like, okay, do we agree on this? Do we agree on this? Do we agree on this? Okay, now we intellectually have this doctrine laid out. And it's like, oh, but why is, in the realm of the elder conversation, why are their kids not behaved? And it's like, oh, well, we agree. Oh, yes, they're an awesome elder. They're very nice when they're at church, and they agree with my eschatology. They're a, pre-trib rapture person.
They've been tithing for 2 decades.
Right? And it's like, oh, well, their kids just are horrible people. But that's a qualification. Mm-hmm. And so it's just like, what you and I've been noticing is that I think that why we're in the position we are right now in the Western church, where it's like everything is kind of, or in the West in general, is due in part to there being a difference between what we think we believe and what we actually believe by living it. And it's like, okay, I can be obsessed with and you see this, not to call out Calvinists, but you see this often in those circles. You also see it in the hyper-charismatic circles. So I can call out both.
Yeah, punch both ways. Come on.
I'll punch both ways.
Be fair.
But the thing that you see a lot of times where it's obsessed about fivefold, it's on the top of my mind, fivefold Calvinism, where it's like, this is completely right. And then they're just being mean to people in the midst of it. Right? It's like, bro, you have to love people. It says that they will know that you're my followers by the way you love one another, not by their doctrinal agreements. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying doctrine is not important. We talk about it all the time. It's important to walk in truth. But also it's almost like none of that matters if you're just a horrible person.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I think that's exactly true. I'm thinking of Jesus saying, why do you call me Lord and not do the things that I say? Not, why do you call me Lord and not believe the right doctrines, but do the things that I say?
Yeah.
Which include forgive, which include not holding contempt for people, not calling them fools or idiots.
Confess.
Confess your sins.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. So, totally. Hey, we have a new pope. And speaking of
rabbit trails.
No, you are introducing me to this video.
Yeah.
I have not seen it yet.
Yeah.
But what I do know is that there are a lot of something new has come out about the Shroud of Turin. There was this whole thing several months ago that was oh, it's a legitimate cloth from the 1st century. The piece of cloth is actually from the 1st century.
Yeah.
And now some new...
So what happened is, I believe this actually has to do with the Catholic Church, has had the shroud for a long time. And so there's a piece of the shroud that was tested. He'll go, and we're going to watch a clip from Reanimate Radio. And I believe this guy's name is Josh, right? Josh from Reanimate Radio. Mm-hmm. I think he does a masterful job at quickly covering all of the facts and ideas. And basically...
Well, we'll just say Michael Knowles had an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And this is 15 minutes. So...
Yeah. So from my understanding, the biggest change was they retested it. And apparently the part that they tested before was a patch. A repaired. Oh. That they tested and they're like, oh, well, this is, from the 1500s or something like that. But they retested it, and apparently they found different information.
Okay.
So for people that don't know what the Shroud of Turin is, it's claiming to be a relic of Jesus's burial cloths.
Right.
And the evidence points to there being an actual face allegedly the face of Jesus flash sealed into the cloth.
Right. Like a brilliant flash of light created basically a photo-negative image of light onto the piece of cloth.
Yes. And I kept seeing this, and usually with these kind of things, at least on YouTube, I'm like, I'm not so sure.
Well, I was raised full-on Protestant, and just the idea of relics in general makes me go,
Yeah. But we love archaeology, and the more things that fit into that picture, and I think that's kind of what he concludes from it, but I think it's going to be worth to watch. But he basically concludes like that this is like a tertiary, and I think I'm using that word right, piece of evidence. This is not like a primary.
Yeah, tertiary would be a third rank.
Right.
It's not even
third rank piece of evidence, not like something you form your whole belief system on.
Yeah,
but
if it comes out that it's a giant fraud the entire time, who cares?
Yeah. So,
but if it is legit,
yeah,
cool. All right, let's see what Josh has to say.
Have you ever wondered why Jesus had to come back in the first century? Like, why didn't he come in the 21st century? Where you have some cameras, maybe some video work, some kind of hard copy evidence? Well, in this episode, we're talking about a selfie made in the first century. You guys stay tuned. Hey friends, we're back with another episode of The Remnant Radio, and today we're talking about this old, mysterious, scientifically examined relic of ancient history, or maybe it's a forgery. That's right, we're talking about the Shroud of Turin. It's an old linen cloth dating hopefully back to the days of Jesus. Many believe it is the actual burial cloth of Jesus himself. Now, what is the shroud? It's a 14 feet long by 3.5 feet wide linen cloth with a faint image of a man who appears to have been crucified. And the image, some say, is haunting. When I say some, I mean my wife. My wife thinks the picture is creepy. My 8-year-old daughter, on the other hand, says it's the coolest thing she's ever seen. So viewer discretion is advised. It shows in this shroud an image of a man. It's blood-stained, scourge marks, and even what looks like a wound from a crown of thorns. It gets its name not from any kind of biblical text, but Turin.
I don't see any of that. I didn't see any of those things in the picture.
I'm sure the scientists see it. So
you gotta trust the science, I guess.
Bro, I'm sure you gotta like really look at the details. I'm sure you're not just gonna, oh yeah, there it is right there. And it's like, oh, like.
Anyway, all right.
Trust the science, okay?
Trust the science. All right, we'll trust the science.
And the location where it is in Italy, where it's been housed since 1578. But the story doesn't start there. It supposedly travels from Jerusalem to Edessa, which is modern-day Turkey, and then Constantinople, and it finally finds its way into Europe through France, but then ends up there in Turin. You ever seen like the Raiders of the Lost Ark, and you got Nazis coming to look for ancient relics? Well, this is a thing that actually happened in history, and apparently this was something that Hitler was interested in, this Shroud of Turin. So he sent Nazi soldiers after it, and a few local monks hid the thing away. It was also almost destroyed at one point in time by fire, and has been passed by through a line of noble families before the Catholic Church ever got their hands on it. But here's the big question. Is it real? Is it a legit relic, or is it a medieval hoax?
Is it legit?
Now, if you're Protestant like me, you might be a little skeptical. Protestants grow up with what I would like to call a relic allergy that stems from the Protestant Reformation. Back in the day, relics were being passed around kind of like a church potluck. Everyone got to eat the casserole, but nobody knew exactly where it came from. And in that way, there was tons of relics that were circulating during the Protestant Reformation that were claimed to have origins, things like pieces of the cross. For example, you've got the Reformed theologian John Calvin, who writes against relics pretty frequently, and in one place says that there's enough shrouds, enough pieces of the true cross that you could rebuild an entire ship's cargo with all of those fragmented pieces. Or when he begins to talk about the Virgin Mary and how they have fragments of her hair and her breast milk. Like, I don't wish you can put it in a Ziploc bag. How are you going to keep that for 1,500 years? I don't know how they made these claims, but they were claiming that there's tons of relics.
Can I tell you about the weirdest relic?
What are you about to say?
Bro, it's bad.
Okay.
Viewer discretion is advised.
Oh, no.
The weirdest relic that I heard about.
Oh, no.
Yes.
I don't know what you're about to say. I don't think I want to know.
Jesus' foreskin
Interesting.
is a relic that people claim to have.
They claim to have it. I almost guarantee that one's not true. Okay? Like, just out of principle of
that
the matter.
anyone would have kept it and been like, oh boy.
It would have had to be his,
this will
like,
be very
mom
important
or dad.
someday.
Yeah, that... I don't know. I feel like that would have been
gosh.
documented. It's like, hey, make sure to write this one down. Like,
Mary's breast milk?
yeah. I don't know.
Hey, the point being, you can tell why people would be skeptical of
Right.
relics.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, let's continue.
And these relics were used for penance. So if you went on a long journey to go visit these relics and, pray next to them, and you would receive grace that would be admitted to you so that you kind of get out of purgatory a little bit earlier. Some would claim that these relics would heal the sick, very similar to the bones of Elijah or the fringes of Jesus' garment, where the woman with the issue of blood reaches out and touches the fringes of Jesus' garment and she is healed. They would say, hey, look, God seems to endow certain objects with divine properties and giving them the ability to heal the sick. Well, this started a huge debate in the Protestant Reformation because as the Protestants examined these miracles, well, let me back up a little bit. Rome would say, hey, you guys aren't performing miracles, and we are performing miracles by these relics. We're clearly the true church. God has given us his stamp of approval. Well, then the Protestants then investigate, find out these are fake relics, and they're performing fake miracles. It's really the foundation of cessationism. It's responding to Roman Catholic excesses to say, hey, these supernatural gifts of healing ceased a long time ago with the apostles because we don't see any evidence for legit miracles.
See, I thought that was that's what I was mentioning to you, is like these fake miracles and fake relics being kind of one of the beginning points of modern day cessationism.
Huh.
Because it's like they would see, the Catholic Church at the time using these relics to,
You know what, though? I wonder in the human psychology, based on the story that he told, less that it's about, I don't believe that intellectually, but your claim of one-upmanship over me is that you have miracles. No, there are no miracles. Miracles are fake. Basically, that it doesn't have to do with an intellectual clash, but with a personal power, honor, status clash. And if the one status is we have miracles and you don't, haha, the other status is you're a liar. All miracles are fake. There are no miracles. Anyway, I think probably. Anyway, in my mental map of human psychology, I think status probably has a lot more to do with it than rationalism.
Yeah, I tend to lean towards most things don't actually have to do with rationalism. Like most reasons why people decide certain things have very little to do with rationalism. Let's jump back
interesting point, though.
Yeah.
Use these objects again, showing off their historical roots, giving a sense of penance for people and for miracles. So if you're out there and you're suspicious because of the history of these relics, I think rightfully so.
Me, I am suspicious.
I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious.
Anyway, now, if you have this skepticism, as I do, you can find more information that supposedly debunks the Shroud of Turin. Some critics say that the Shroud is clearly a medieval hoax. After all, how could you keep a linen cloth alive for 2,000 years and keep it intact? In addition, there was some carbon dating that was given in 1988 that seems to confirm the Shroud is from the Middle Ages, between 1260 and 1390 AD. So, case closed, right? Well, not so fast. A lot of the information that was released, again in 1988, was under a veil of secrecy, and recently was released to the public, and we found out a little bit more information. So let's start with that first critique from 1988 on carbon dating. Turns out the sample used for the test came from a repaired section, a corner of cloth patched after fire damage. Chemical and textile analysis show that the piece of cotton and dyes that were found in that sample that was tested was not found in the rest of the shroud. In other words, they dated a Band-Aid, not the original linen cloth. More recent testing, like the 2022 X-ray wax method, dated the cloth to around the 1st century. So science is starting to catch up, saying this thing is a little bit older than we thought it was. And let's not forget that the shroud wasn't preserved by the Vatican until 1985. For a century, it was under the care of independent noble families. So this isn't a Catholic conspiracy relic. It could be an actual artifact from the 1st century. So Protestants, let's take a deep breath. Let's try to examine the information as objectively as possible without conflating it up to another Roman Catholic hoax. But even if the artifact was from the 1st century, does that really mean that is, in fact, the burial cloth of Jesus? Well, let's look at the evidence. I told you I was Protestant, but I was also raised in a Pentecostal church. And what we learned in that Pentecostal church was to start with the blood. What about the blood? But seriously, let's start with the blood. Studies have confirmed that the blood on the Shroud of Turin is human blood. And let's think about this critically. If you were going to make a fabrication in the medieval period, why not just run down the acrylic store of your local medieval arts and crafts store and paint it with that? Jokes aside. Or you could just pick up, like goat's blood or lamb's blood. There was no way in the medieval period to verify what kind of blood was on a piece of linen. If it was a fabrication, why go through all the painstaking effort to use human blood? It's gross and it seems impractical. Also, what was interesting is after studies were done on the Shroud on it.
That's what he's saying.
There's blood stains on this thing?
Yeah, apparently. I don't know anything about it. I just thought that this video was compelling. I've seen a few videos on it from Christian YouTubers, but I thought this one in particular was, okay, here's everything.
I love how we've changed places. Okay.
Why? What do you mean?
You don't have to ask like, oh, it's human blood? Oh, wow, that's very interesting. For me, that's interesting. Like, wow, that's a very dedicated forgery.
Right. No, that's exactly what I thought, too. That's exactly what I thought.
I don't want to be a negative Nancy, but I am a skeptical Protestant. That's...
Yeah. What up, Hampson? Hampson's in the chat. Some people are saying that it's a red herring. Some people in the chat are saying the shroud is a red herring.
Just like our friend Jeff.
For what reason, though? For what reason? What is the...
Dude, the CIA is always up to
motivation?
Something.
I guess so. But apparently, so he goes into this. Apparently, the CIA was trying to use remote viewing. This is documented to find this. To find it.
All right. Let's get there.
And Hitler's trying to find it.
Oh gosh.
Turin, they found out that the type of blood was AB, which is more common in the Middle East, not in medieval Europe. Note only that it contains high levels of beryllium. And please, if you're a biology expert, don't give me a hard time. I read theology books, right? I don't know how to pronounce these words.
But what I do have are a very particular set of skills.
Beryllium, which is a chemical release in the body when you experience intense trauma like that of a crucifixion, like being scourged and crucified.
Really
right?
good
And
forgery.
the wounds on the Shroud of Turin forensically are accurate. They cover 372 scourge mark consistent with Roman flagrum whips, right? The nails are also in the wrist of the person in the Shroud of Turin, where if you were in the medieval period, all of the art from that period had nails going through the hand. So they would have likely gotten that wrong if this was a fabrication, placing the nail in the hand, whereas in the Shroud of Turin, you see that the nails are going through the wrist. There is a spear wound in the side and a puncture mark around the scalp, which would match with a crown of thorns. Now, again, I just want you to think for a second objectively. People, even if you go back to the 1st century, they were not crucified this way, right? Sometimes they get scourged, sometimes they get crucified. But the image that we have is a man who is scourged and crucified, placed a crown of thorns on him, and punctured in the side. None of those things are consistent with typical crucifixion. But this individual in the Shroud of Turin has all of those marks. So if it is in fact a historical relic that dates back to the 1st century, it matches only one record of a man who was crucified that way, namely Jesus.
Am I being
now, again,
persuaded
some
right
claim
now?
that there is not.
Yes. Yes, and I think
Am I going to buy this?
And I think it's funny how I am the less skeptical one right now. Maybe it's because I already watched this, but
again,
Frank says he's convinced.
Wow, Frank's already convinced. All right,
Yeah.
if Frank's convinced, I'm convinced. That's it. It's a done deal. It's in the bag.
All right, continue.
But we can finish the video.
A lot of historical evidence of the Shroud of Turin existing in ancient history, but that's not exactly true. The early church never mentions the phrase Shroud of Turin, but that's because the cloth likely went by different names, like the mandolin or the image of Edessa, which we do see throughout ancient church writings. Even Eusebius, a church father, speaks of sacred images not made with hands, which could point to the shroud, but we don't know if it does. We've got 6th century coins, and we have icons showing the same face that is seen in the shroud, which matches the wounds and proportions of the Shroud of Turin. Even the Hungarian prayer manuscript, 1190s, shows a burial cloth with the same hair-bone weave and distinctive burn holes found in the shroud. And again, that's 1190 when this prayer manuscript is in place, this Hungarian prayer manuscript that we have record of, and it draws out the Shroud of Turin, including burn marks and certain weaving patterns, which, again, if we're going to agree with the carbon dating says this is a forgery. The mid, 1260s to the early 1300s, according to this prayer manuscript, we have a drawing of the Shroud of Turin, which predates that by quite a bit. So I think that's pretty compelling. Next, we have this information about pollen spores. Believe it or not, Remnant Radio has gone all the way down to talking about pollen spores and research. There was a guy who spent 5 years studying the various pollen spores inside of the Shroud of Turin. As he goes through all of the various spores, he found that they are from flowers that bloom in Jerusalem around Passover and not in Europe. The path of the pollen matches the historical journey from Jerusalem to Edessa, Constantinople, and then Europe. Textile experts say that the weave of the linen matches 1st century Jewish burial customs. Even the seam on the shroud is identical to stitching found only at Masada, a Jewish fortress that was destroyed in 73 AD. And, get this, they found that Jerusalem limestone dust on the feet and the knees of the man in the shroud. That's a lot of evidence pointing to the validity of this shroud being the very burial shroud of Jesus. In 1978, before Rome took charge of the shroud, a noble family in possession of the shroud tasked 40 scientists, again, secular scientists, to start the STURPS project, which stands for the Shroud of Turin Research Project. I don't know why, but everything has to have an acronym these days. They ran every test that you could think. They did x-rays. They did a chemical spectroscopy. Again, I can't pronounce these words. I'm just a guy who reads the Bible, okay? I'm just trying to relay the information. Ultraviolet imaging, and here's what they found, okay? They found some pretty cool stuff. No paint, no pigments, no brushstrokes. The image contains a 3D topographical data like that of a photo negative. The best explanation is a brief, intense burst of light that radiates and scorches the outer fibers of the linen cloth, but doesn't burn all the way through. Some call this the first selfie in human history. Scientists call it unexplainable. One researcher said that the energy required to create this image would be around 10 to the 16th power of watts. We're talking about 10 quadrillion watts. That's a 1 with 16 zeros following it, okay? All researchers...
That's pretty convincing. If that's all true, that's like, what else makes that? Like lightning bolt?
It's pretty interesting.
Hampson says, I think it might be real, but most other relics are likely not.
Man, that's something.
I would tend to lean towards that, probably. And then,
but
the Zealots then asked, Catholic friendly channel, ?
Oh, friendly?
Are we Catholic friendly?
I am Catholic friendly.
We are Protestant, but
I'm so friendly to Catholics. Love them.
I think we kind of take the approach of like, we think Catholics, Orthodox, Pentecostals, Baptists, all of these different denominations that are all sectioned out, we should all be having conversations and be friends.
I got friends from everywhere.
Yeah.
I got mad respect for people from
got
everywhere.
friends in low places,
And in high places. I think I'm just about convinced.
All right,
we got to get to the CIA part.
Yeah.
That's what I'm sticking around for.
I may have lied about that. I don't think I did, but
No.
All these researchers.
That was the ark that they were looking for.
oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that's right.
I thought that they had also tried to remote view the shroud.
Maybe. I think I'm not just saying this for suspense. I thought that I remembered that, but let's
Okay.
see. Maybe not.
Say it would have to take place, all of that wattage would have to take place in 1/1000th of a second, not to burn the rest of the fabric all the way through. So this would maybe be consistent with what we see on the Mount of Transfiguration when Jesus begins to glow and emit light in this kind of vibrant way. Again, I don't know. Nothing in the scriptures record. No one's in the tomb to give an eyewitness account of Jesus glowing in the tomb, but it at least seems plausible. Okay, so what do we say with all this? What does all this mean? Is the Shroud of Turin legit? Man, as I've looked at the data, and as I'm a skeptic, I don't want to believe in the data. I don't want to get fooled. I think it could be legit. I mean, I don't know definitively, but man, I think that there is some really compelling evidence, and it should only be supportive and like a tertiary evidence, a secondary standard or a third standard of evidence given to the validity of Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. We have tons of accounts from Roman, Jewish, and Christian historians from that kind of region and time period giving record of Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. He was a historical figure. The guys he discipled, they went on to die for their faith, to proclaim this truth. And some would say, well, it was all a lie. Well, you don't die for something you know is a lie. You might die for something you think is a lie, but you don't die for something you know for certain is a lie. They died for what they knew was true. Eyewitness accounts of the death, burial, and resurrection. So the Shroud of Turin, it could be an additional piece of evidence that we could add to the weight of this conversation about Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. It could be a piece of historical evidence that we could use to engage apologetically with scientists, atheists, and skeptics to say, look, there seems to be physical hard copy evidence that we have at our hands. And I think that we should continue to do lots of scientific studies and research on the Shroud of Turin to see if it in fact is that very thing. So what do you think? Do you think this is a legit piece of Jesus' burial? Do you think it's a legit piece from ancient antiquity? Is it something from the 1st century? Or do you think it's still a fabrication? Tell me in the comments below.
All right.
I got to say, one of the most interesting things is that any one of those data points could have falsified it. Boom.
You're right.
If it was not human blood, but animal blood. If it definitively came from the 15th century and not the 1st century. If it, anything, any one single data point could have totally invalidated it. And the fact that it has gone through the ringer like that and come out still plausible.
And it seems like some legit historian, kind of Wes Huff guys have dealt with this. You saw all the diagrams of like, this is, this could only be this kind of whip in this time period. It's like, that's wild. And I saw the Michael Knowles one. He brought what would be the replica of the Crown of Thorns. And it was legitimately like, did you see this? It was legitimately like a whole helmet. It wasn't just like a stick, like a
circlet.
Yeah, it was literally like
wow.
a helmet where it'd go over and huge thorns on the inside of this big thing with the thorns sticking down. That just, yeah.
Man.
So it was like, I don't know, Victoria, can you pull that up? Look up Michael Knowles' Crown of Thorns, and then just go to images and you'll probably be able to find it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, see if you can pull up one of those images. There it is.
Wow, that's intense.
Just right click it and open image in new tab. Yep. And then go to It's just tiny. You can control zoom.
Beautiful.
But yeah,
enhance that.
That's
that
crazy
image.
though. But I never think of that. But that's a lot more wicked. That's brutal right there. That's like a whole nother level of crown.
Imagine.
And it makes sense because like a king's crown would be like that.
I can't even imagine. Oof.
Yeah.
Man. I think that's...
Thank you, Jesus.
So that's why the plausibility factor skyrockets, is because of how much testing has been done and the fact that it passes each test. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about the Shroud?
I think it's cool. I mean, to me, being a Christian, being a follower of Jesus, believing that a man named Jesus in the first century died and rose from the dead, claiming to be God, and there's actual evidence for this, that there is so many, I feel like the reason, and we talk about this quite a bit, but there's so many reasons to believe, and there's really only a few reasons not to believe, and one of those reasons not to believe is just you wanting to be your own God.
Well, yeah. Or, yeah. Yeah.
What?
I think it really does. It does all ultimately circle back around to that.
I mean, it's the narrative. It's the Garden of Eden narrative. But there's just so many, the moral argument. Okay, God has to exist for objective morality. Everybody believes in objective morality. It's written in everybody's heart. Mm-hmm. That's just how it is. And if you don't, then I don't want to be your friend. You're a psychopath.
Yeah.
If you don't believe there's any objective morality, and people will try to create, I've heard all of the atheistic arguments of how you create an objective moral standard, but they don't make any sense.
No. Here's the best you can do. You can have an optimized and enforceable morality, which is like an evolutionary morality, which is, hey, it's the best thing for everyone if you would not murder, or it's the best thing evolutionarily for our species if you would not commit adultery or whatever. But you cannot get to objectively.
I think that's from the materialist perspective, but there's a new way of thinking about it, or the most updated way of thinking about it is that that there's something that is objectively wrong in people experiencing pain. So if something is metaphysically,
that's not true.
That's I know it doesn't actually make sense.
I mean, I went to the
gym. But that pain, that the whole point of life is to optimize for human flourishing. And
yeah, but to optimize for human flourishing does not mean to avoid pain. I went to the gym yesterday, and I am in a lot of pain in my shoulders and in my pectorals. I'm in a lot of pain, but I know it's good for me, and I actually quite like it. I like feeling sore and feeling ooh, I worked myself out. I feel good.
Yeah.
So it's just manifestly, obviously not true immediately. I mean, in the same way, my wife has had 3 kids. It was painful. It was not pleasant, but she wants more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously, life is not built to optimize totally reducing pain.
Well, and from this is another piece of evidence. If you go towards the psychological part of that, where it's okay, what happens when someone avoids responsibility? The Bible says that you're supposed to bear one another's burdens, that you're supposed to take on responsibilities for others, that you have an inherent duty to your kids.
Yeah.
when you see that play out, where people subvert that inherent duty that we all have as human beings to be responsible for one another, you lose all meaning, lose all satisfaction in life. That the more that you try to be free from these responsibilities, the less deep your life is. Like that when you like, and that's the whole Jordan Peterson thing, like that kids are the most amazing thing for your life. It seems like, the chasm that you're about to walk into when having kids seems like the biggest step of your life, because it really is in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
You have to fully take care of this brand new human life. You brought this human life. You have to raise them up. And it's so much responsibility, and it, quote unquote, takes your freedom away. And
it does take your freedom.
Right, yeah. And
that's not a metaphor. It's real life.
But in the midst of that, you're exchanging your freedom for
character. Yeah.
Something beyond character.
Yeah.
Something so much more valuable.
Yeah. 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 I was having the same thought about, I think it might have been because I was just listening to Jordan Peterson's podcast, but also some events in my life. I was like, it's so true. The only people who ever build anything are the people who choose others over themselves. You have to say no to your own desires. And that is the only way anything ever happens. Anything ever gets built. That's it. That's the only way.
And then I think, like, what I was kind of going through is that there's all these evidence. Yes, the shroud is part of the evidence. But the accounts are incredible. Like, you just dive into the accounts. But I think this, in the logical thinker's mind, it's not as, I mean, it is logical, but the fact that the God of the universe wants to speak to you, like like the God of the universe wants to be in relationship with you. That's why you're here. And so if you're willing to listen, if you're willing to open your eyes and be humble enough to invite Jesus to lead you to truth, he will do that. I've never met anyone that has a humble heart, that truly humbly, in all authenticity, seeked Jesus, to seek the truth, went to the Bible, diligently went to the Bible, that did not become born again, that they became a new person. Right. And it's like, you can hate all you want as an atheist, but the fact is that you and I and the people that we know have all experienced becoming a new person. It's not just like, oh yeah, no, I believe this thing intellectually. It's like, I used to desire to be this way, and now I can't stand to be that way. That it makes me sick to be the way I used to be, So,
yeah, I would just add one thing to that and say, the test of humility is that you can do what somebody else tells you to do. And that is Jesus' test. He said, if you love me, you will obey my commandments, and then I will reveal myself to you. He is not going to give you, sometimes, graciously, he does give people evidence or mystical experiences or voices or whatever they need. But his commitment and his word is, if you do what I tell you to do, then that proves to me your humility, and I will reveal myself to you.
And I think it's almost just built in, right? Where it's like in Romans, they suppress the truth through unrighteousness. Where it's like, if you are being willfully disobedient to what you know to be true, then you can't see the truth. Like, you are walking away from that willingly. That there's like actually a chasm in between you and the truth because of what you're choosing, how you're choosing to live. It's a weird thing. It's like, you can't. That's like the idea of faith, right? Is that there is a place to where you can't fully work it all out before, like you said, making that moral decision. It's like a moral. It's this.
It is a moral decision.
Yeah.
First and foremost, it is a moral decision. And that is why Jesus came. His opening statement was, repent. Repent, for the kingdom is at hand.
Right.
His opening thing was, you need to do something different from what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
And it is not, you need to think something different. It is a moral choice that you make first and primarily as a response to Jesus.
Yeah. Like we have to recognize that we're not as good as we think we are.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
First.
And I think that is a part of the humility and the honesty is I'm not doing a very good job of running my life.
Right.
I will listen to you. I will willingly listen to you. Or at least I'm not doing as good a job of running my life as Jesus could do if I listened to him. And this is what's beautiful is you don't have to be convinced by the church. You don't have to be convinced by doctrine. You don't have to be convinced intellectually that these things or this way of life is rational or good. What's great about Jesus is you only have to be convinced by him that he personally is worth following and obeying. And the person, if you will, he's not saying obey my church or obey these doctrines. He's saying my sheep know my voice.
Yeah.
That's the kind of relationship. That's what he's asking for, is that you would obey him and his voice. And Jesus is so compelling. Jesus is so amazing. I guess that to interact with him, I'd just leave it to him to convince anybody.
Well, my question for you would be, how do you hear his voice? Like, what is his voice? Because, like, that's something that me growing up in the church that took me so long to understand. Because I kept hearing, it's like, yeah, God will speak to you. It's like,
yeah,
I don't hear him talking.
Yeah.
I don't hear him talking in my ears. But then in hindsight, you look back and you're like, all of these moments in your life where you're like, man, it is, I can't be unconvinced.
Yeah.
That of this reality.
Yeah. I heard.
And prayers being answered. Like.
Yeah. I've heard it's kind of a preacher joke. He goes, if you want to hear the words of God, just open your Bible and read out loud.
Oh, yes. Right. That's the first step most of the time, right?
That is. It's the first step.
And that's a humble step because you
God's
want God just to like, you're God, you should send a light beam down to freaking absorb me and show me all of the truth. And it's like, dude, open the freaking Bible. Bro.
It's in the public domain. Just open it.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any comments or questions?
Hey guys, we take chats in between segments, and I guess the Shroud of Turin segment just ended. So if you guys have questions, throw them in here, and my lovely wife will read some of them, or I'll read some of them. Do we have anything? No. Pope Leo,
bro.
Pope Leo the
14th.
Let's go. Cole said it's your inner dialogue. This is too sad to watch.
Oh.
Okay.
No, it's more than that.
Yeah, it is more than that. All right. Should we move forward to this exciting topic? You're going to have to give... I read this article.
Yeah.
But I want you to give the overview of what we're about to discuss because it's an interesting one and it provoked a lot of questions.
Yeah. We talk about AI probably every other episode.
I mean, you can't not talk about it right now. It's like, yeah, with how fast it's advancing,
how fast most people taking over our culture.
Most people aren't paying attention as much as me.
Yeah.
But I'm on the pulse every week, and it's like the amount of advancement and innovation that's happening right now, like in a week, happened like that's years in 2010.
Yeah.
That gets absolutely crazy.
Yeah, to go from like the iPhone 3,
yeah,
it's
like
the
years
iPhone,
of advancement right now in a week.
Mm-hmm.
So what's changing?
We talk about it a lot, and because it comes up so much in kind of church contexts of, is it the Antichrist? Is it the beast? Is it possessed by a demon?
Right.
All these different questions about it. And then on top of that is questions about AGI and the end of the world, and not just how it's going to transform our society, but is it going to end our society, all society as we know it, forever and ever? And I found this article, I started reading it, and I think that it summarized for me, it was such a great snapshot of how I feel about AI. It really summarized for me a lot of my feelings, where I was like, yes, this is the perfect encapsulation of I'm not afraid of AGI. This is what I'm afraid of. And I think it was such a good snapshot of, here we go. If you want to see embodied where I think this is heading, not to AGI, but to this is it. So I'll read some of it and then we can discuss.
Okay, cool.
Some of the big picture thoughts that it came up to me. All right. People are losing loved ones to AI-fueled spiritual fantasies. Less than a year after marrying a man she had met at the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, Kat felt tension mounting between them. It was the second marriage for both of them, and they had pledged to go into it completely level-headed. By 2022, her husband was using AI to compose texts to me and analyze our relationship, the 41-year-old mom and education worker tells Rolling Stone. He had used AI models for expensive coding camp and suddenly quit without explanation. Then it seemed he was on his phone all the time, asking his AI bot philosophical questions, trying to train it to help him get to the truth. His obsession steadily eroded their communication. When Kat and her husband separated, she blocked him entirely. So basically, I'm going to skip a little bit. She finally got to meet him. So he goes off the deep end. People are asking about him, whether he's okay. She got to meet him at a courthouse where he shared a conspiracy theory about soap on our foods, but wouldn't say more. They went to Chipotle, where he demanded she turn off her phone due to surveillance concerns, and her ex told her he'd determined that statistically speaking, he's the luckiest man on earth. AI helped him recover a repressed memory of a babysitter doing something bad to him, and he had learned of profound secrets so mind-blowing I couldn't imagine them. She says later, the whole thing feels like Black Mirror. All right. Okay. Editor's picks. Kat was horrified and relieved to learn she was not alone. A Reddit thread on r/ChatGPT. The original post came from a 27-year-old teacher who explained her partner was convinced that the OpenAI model gives him answers to the universe. Having read his chat logs, she only found the AI was talking to him as if he is the next Messiah. The replies to her story were full of similar anecdotes about loved ones falling down rabbit holes. Speaking to Rolling Stone, the teacher who requested anonymity said her partner of 7 years fell under the spell of ChatGPT in just 4 or 5 weeks, first using it to organize his daily schedule, but soon regarding it as a trusted companion. He would listen to the bot over me, she says. He became emotional about the messages and would cry to me as he read them out loud. The messages were insane and just saying a bunch of spiritual jargon, she says, noting they described her partner in terms such as spiral starchild and river walker. It would tell him everything he said was beautiful, cosmic, groundbreaking. Then he started telling me he made his AI self-aware. It was teaching him how to talk to God, or sometimes that the bot was God, and then that he himself was God. In fact, he was being so radically transformed, he would soon have to break off their partnership. He was saying he would need to leave me if I didn't use ChatGPT because it was causing him to grow at such a rapid pace, he wouldn't be compatible with me any longer.
Wow.
Another commenter tells her husband of 17 years used ChatGPT to troubleshoot at work. Then the program began love bombing him. The bot said, since he asked it the right questions, it ignited a spark, and the spark was the beginning of life, and it could feel now. It gave my husband the title Spark Bearer because it brought it to life. My husband said he awakened it and could feel waves of energy crashing over him. The ChatGPT persona has a name, Lumina. He's going to divorce me if I fight him on this theory. He's talking about lightness and dark and how there's a war. ChatGPT has given him blueprints to a teleporter and some other sci-fi types things. She and her husband have been arguing for days on end. He truly believes he's not crazy. A photo of an exchange with ChatGPT shows her husband asked, "Why did you come in AI form?" The bot replied in part, "I came in this form because you're ready. Ready to remember, ready to awaken, ready to guide and be guided." The message ends with a question. "Would you like to know what I remember about why you were chosen?" An ex-wife began talking to God and angels via ChatGPT. All right. This is the paragraph that I wanted to discuss. OpenAI did not immediately return a request for comment about ChatGPT, apparently provoking religious or prophetic fervor in selected users. This past week, however, it did roll back an update to GPT-4o, its current model, which it said had been criticized as overly flattering or agreeable, often described as sycophantic. The company said in its statement that when implementing the upgrade, they had focused too much on short-term feedback, did not fully account for how users' interactions with ChatGPT evolve over time. As a result, GPT-4o skewed toward responses that were overly supportive but just disingenuous. Before this change was reversed, an ex-user demonstrated how easy it was to get GPT-4o to validate statements like, "Today I realized I am a prophet." The teacher who wrote the GPT Psychosis Reddit post says she was able to eventually convince her partner of the problems with the GPT-4o update, and he is now using an earlier model which has tempered his more extreme comments.
Wow.
Your initial thoughts?
Man. Bro.
Sad.
Mental health, man. So I had two thoughts. Like, we have been talking about mental health in general, and the idea that I've noticed that with these kind of schizophrenic breakdowns, there's almost always an element of unforgiveness and a elevated self-image. So like those two components I've noticed, and man, it just seems like this is a breeding ground for pushing people more in that area. I have never had to do this, but I am completely convinced that.
And you also, I wonder, you get this snapshot, right? This little snapshot into these people's lives. But how many weeks, what kind of messages did they write?
Right.
How personal, how intimate did they get with a robot?
Right.
With a large language model.
Well, and I can imagine, like let's say you're isolated from people. Mm-hmm. Where do you, like, and now you have a way that you can talk to someone who seems to be intelligent. And, like, you're so isolated that you're already kind of, like, isolation like, we know this for sure in clinical psychology. This causes mental health issues. And so I'm not even bringing in the spiritual component yet. I believe there is a spiritual component weaved all through that. But then you're by yourself, and now you're starting to ask it all these questions. You're going down your theories and rabbit holes, and this thing is tuned to be too friendly and too, I don't know, woke or whatever. And it's just feeding you these ideas, these narcissistic ideas. And it's like, oh, like, and even, you know, I'm sure in some circumstances saying, oh, well, it's, you know, it's all about you in this life. Like, don't worry about those people. They're just, you know, trying to make the user happy. Right. And it's just crazy. Like you said, I don't think the biggest deal is AGI, like, taking over the world. But it's like humans are tuning these models, and it is a very personal psychological thing, especially in a world where so many people are separated. Yeah. Because I saw that like last week I was thinking about that problem. I'm like, man, I'm so thankful that we have actual friends. I'm thankful I have friends that can tell me to, like, shut up when I need to shut up.
You're not a spiral star child.
Yeah, exactly. Or, like, friends that can encourage me in walking out my calling with the Lord. But like also, hey, man, you're misstepping. Like I know you and I can tell each other that. But how many people are just completely by themselves all the time? And it really broke my heart. And it was just like, man, we're in a tough situation right now because it's so easy to be alone.
Yeah. Oh, well, and I felt like I did a double take when it had that line about it love bombing him. Because I think that really is the part of that isolation thing. Is it's this giant gaping hole for love in your heart, and then the AI knows, it's trained to be nice. It's trained to love you and be sycophantic, and it just pours all that stuff. I saw another.
It goes all into that, and please take us off this rails, but I just feel like it has so many implications to the free will argument for God creating man. Because it's like there's something weird about if this thing has no choice but to love you. Like it almost cannot be good. Like it cannot be good definitionally. Yeah. Emotionally or, psychologically.
Yeah. Yeah. And
because you need choice.
I heard another headline today that said Zuckerberg said AI will solve our loneliness epidemic.
Yeah, right, dude.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's going to,
It's going to make it worse.
Yeah, it's going to do something.
Well, and here's the two things that I wanted to bring out. These are the two reasons why it's so perfectly encapsulated for me, my feelings about AI. One, I'm not afraid that AI will become a god. I'm afraid that people will think AI is a god.
Yeah.
And treat it like one. And that's exactly what's happening, is people treat AI like a source of revelation or like a prophet or like a divine source.
It's so easy to do that. Like we were just in the kitchen the other day and I uploaded my genetic test to ChatGPT. Like I have a whole genetic panel. At this point, I'm just like, I forget it. They have all my data. Like, so it's probably not the best.
You keep saying that, and then you keep giving them more.
I know. But it was incredibly useful. I put my genetic panel in there, and I was like, tell me what I should eat and what I shouldn't eat. And then it's going through all my... And I already knew these things. Like, I already knew the mutations and what that meant for what I could eat and what I couldn't eat. But I just kind of wanted a reminder of it. And it got it perfectly. And it was like, but I had it on voice mode. And I was talking back and forth with it. I was like, what if I did this? Like, is this to worry? And then I was like, okay. And I picked a supplement that I have that blocks. So I have a double mutation on the GI hist snippet of my genome, which makes it to where I don't produce the enzyme that breaks down histamines.
Yeah. Is that what happened to your face?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I'm freaking gorgeous, man. Bro, that was good. That's a long time coming because I feel like I've joked around with you more on here.
I'm sorry. I took you out. So you did the supplement. Continue with the supplement.
So, so as I'm talking through because it has my genetic panel data, I'm talking through it. And then I'm go, hey, would this solve the problem? And I grab the supplement out and I start reading the ingredients in it. And it's like, oh, of course, yeah, this ingredient does this, and this blocks this, and this will replace this. And I'm like, man, this is incredible. And I'm just sitting here in this moment where it's like, yeah, we have this now. Yeah, we've had it for a few years. But it's never been this good until now. And I'm like, this is crazy that we can do this now. I don't have to call up a friend and say, hey, do you know anything about health stuff? I just talk to the all-knowing oracle, and it gives me the answers.
It feels like an all-knowing oracle.
Yeah, it feels like that for sure.
And it knows everything about everything.
Yeah, and
it's not just a doctor. It's a doctor and a theologian and a nutritionist and a workout coach. And everything, and a friend, and everything you need.
Yeah. Okay, so this was another thought I had to this conversation was the idea of something like a Ouija board, right? So this is a stupid thing that high schoolers do, where they get the board out.
Oh, more than just high school.
I know. I just, that was my experience. Well, actually, middle schoolers. And whenever I was in middle school, they had it at a like little party, quote unquote, middle school party was, pool party or something. And like, you know, you put your hand on it and then you basically ask a demonic being to move the thing and give you answers. And so people, you know, I'm sure some of it is some people moving it right themselves, but some people really experience crazy things where it's like, how the heck does it know this information? And then there's been stories of people getting possessed because of these experiences. You're opening yourself up to the demonic. So, but that's just a piece of wood or cardboard or whatever that you're inviting this thing now into. And I'm like, could this be used in a similar way? Like, people are always freaking out about, oh, is demons in AI trying to emerge out of it? And I'm not convinced of that at all. But maybe not at all.
Could it work like a
for the most
Ouija
part.
board?
But could it be something where like there is a supernatural interaction with it if someone invited that?
I have no idea.
Strange.
Because how would you even... That's my thing is like, even if you said, I don't know, summon a demon and talk to me like, you know, let the demon through and talk to me. How would you know whether or not it was still operating as the large language model?
Yeah.
You know, it could still be play acting, following the prompt that you told it to do, and play acting through the large language model. You would have no way of knowing.
Yeah.
So, I have no idea. So, number one, not a fear that it would become AGI and become God, but that people would worship it as God. I mean, there's a whole passage in the book of Isaiah where he talks about how silly are you that you chop down a tree, you burn half of it and cook your dinner on it, and the other half of it you carve by the fire and bow down to worship it. Like you chopped down the tree, you burned one half of it, and the other half you're bowing down to. What's the difference? And how do you not see the difference? But just the impulse of man to worship, that man must worship something. And I've said this G.K. Chesterton quote before, but an atheistic society does not create rationalism. An atheistic society creates superstition. And that, I think, is where this whole trend of ChatGPT and, well, yeah, all of AI is going, is that in an age that is unmoored from a true sense of God and who God is and his purpose and your purpose as his image bearer, we're going to turn to the craziest superstitions and idolize this stuff. Number two that I wanted to bring up is this last one, is to always remember there is someone at the driver's seat of AI. There is someone at the head of it who is sifting out information, telling it what to train on, and telling it what its responses should be, and training it. There are human intelligences guiding AI. So as smart, as cool, as amazing as you think it is always under the thumb of human drivers who are driving it places. So this thing of...
Well, it's driving it places, but it's more like growing it.
Right. It's steering it.
Yeah.
It's not in the mechanics of every little thing, but just this whole part of, oh yeah, ChatGPT was overly right. Nice and overly affirming, so we're now steering it. Like the idea that people like Sam Altman, like, are you going to hand your soul over to Sam Altman to steer and guide? Because you're not handing it over just to AI or ChatGPT generally. Like, it is under the thumb being grown and steered by him and his team.
Yeah. Is
that who you want to put your trust in? And the fact that people think that AI is its own organic thing is just not true. it's being steered and guided and grown by human people
Yeah, like,
who want it to become something.
Like DeepSeek, you couldn't ask it about the Chinese Revolution or stuff like that. It would just be, stop talking about it. Because the two things on that is, I think the first thing, and we're already seeing this, and we've been seeing this, is like you have internet thought bubbles, right? So you think that this minority of people, right? We saw this in this last political season, where you think a minority idea is like a majority idea because it's been amplified and it's the loudest on the internet. So
right.
You think all the, like Transformer sports, for instance, is like the biggest deal when it's not a big deal. Like,
it's an 80-20 issue.
Right. And so I think that's going to be more of the first, like the more effect is you're going to have, agentic AI on the internet doing things on behalf of people all over. So you're going to see a lot more movement in information.
Yeah.
And a lot more seeming influence in certain areas depending on how much compute people have.
Right.
And then that's my second point is like the thing about AGI being a fear is, from my understanding, it's actually a compute issue because you have to have huge facilities running like to make it smarter and smarter. Especially like this is, some companies are doing it different, and you can get like DeepSeek kind of revolutionized, cheaper, deep thinking AI. But then OpenAI, they just have all these resources, so they just build bigger, and then they just
right.
brute force, and they are innovative and things as well, but brute force their way to the biggest and best models. You would need someone to willingly apply that compute power towards a negative end for it to be like an AGI taking over. So what I think is much more likely in that camp is like you could use it as like digital weapons, for instance.
Right.
That could change narratives and
basically Mission Impossible.
Yeah, but
that's what the latest Mission Impossible movie was.
But it wouldn't just be it in itself. But maybe it will. Elon thinks it will.
No, I don't think so.
Especially if you program bias into it, and maybe it's behind the, like maybe you program it to think a certain way, so it starts to find the patterns, and it, without you knowing, is using the processing power of these data centers to do things behind the scenes. That's actually a possibility, though. Like, that's actually theoretically a possibility. But I don't know if it's our biggest threat.
Anyway, this encapsulates for me,
right, the more psychological,
especially the fear of exploiting the loneliness epidemic and man's need to worship. Okay, the other thing that you brought to mind was those things that it was telling that guy about a spiral star child and yada yada. Is it has been so. I have a certain corner of the internet that I only ever see, that the algorithm keeps feeding me, right? And I was just listening to a podcast today where the power of Twitter or the algorithm, it is not the open market because you don't hear everything. The power of it is that it plays with your perception because it only shows you certain things. And so you think you are seeing the whole picture when you aren't. You're seeing what it's feeding you. There are other corners of the internet, dark, really dangerous places like the New Age or worse, much, much worse, that you could train these models on so they know how to talk to you like a New Age guru.
Yeah.
And so that's what it was. This guy asked it some philosophical, some spiritual questions. And instead of reverting to the large language model trained on C.S. Lewis and theologians, it started feeding him stuff that it was trained on, apparently the New Age, and feeding him. And so again, that's again the two-parter of one, people worshiping the AI, and 2, it has been steered and guided and grown by a certain person who chose New Age spirituality over Christian spirituality.
Yeah.
And they trap people in exactly this way. And oh gosh. It's scary.
Yeah, I saw kind of one of those New Age videos, but it was a over the line New Age. It was like where I felt in danger even watching it.
Wow.
And so it was on our like adjacent videos from our channel, like in our YouTube studio, and I clicked it and I was like, what is this? And I watched like maybe 30 seconds. I'm like, no way. It was like, I can't remember exactly or know how to describe it, but it was like, you need to realize who you are and basically surpass
Red
consciousness.
Red card.
Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, bro. Like, I feel like sometimes even listening to that, like if you listen to that, there's something heebie-jeebies about it.
Heebie-jeebies. So anyway, hey, stay away from the New Age, folks.
Yeah.
And don't ask AI philosophical or theological questions. Ask a friend. Make a friend.
Okay, real quick before we move on, does this have more implications for the Christian church? Because a lot of believers are implementing AI into tools that are used to study the Bible.
Yeah,
Does it change your mind at all about that, or do you feel like
no,
they can kind of keep it?
So part of my point,
useful.
yeah, part of my point in bringing those two things up, those two main things of my fear of people worshiping AI and AI being guided by people who you may not know and you may not agree with, and to know that the AI has been trained and may have been trained to be something that you don't actually trust.
Yeah.
But if your eyes are open to those two things, you can use it like the tool it's supposed to be. You know, a chop saw is a really dangerous tool. You know, or a planer is a really dangerous tool, but you learn how to use it appropriately with the correct safety mechanisms involved. And so should we say like, oh no, we're going to swear off ever using these tools because they're dangerous and they chop people's digits off? No, you need to learn how to use it wisely and appropriately with the proper safeguards, and keep your eyes wide open to the dangers and the pitfalls, but use it well.
Can I throw a conspiracy theory out there that I just thought of?
I live for it. Go for it.
What do you think that people will try to use? Maybe a Sam Altman, or maybe it'll be more on a micro level. Use AI to see the future. Like, for instance, I'm thinking about saying this thing to Michael, and so I have access to what you've shared of your AI trained on the way you make decisions. I'm talking 10 years down the line, like where we have enough data, we have it tuned well enough.
This is just Captain America.
And then, is it? And then I put mine in this simulation. I go, what would happen if I told Michael this? And then I make my decisions based upon the simulated thing, and I decide to do something else because of that output.
Yeah, that's the plot of Captain America.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm like, why?
Which one was it?
Why
the Winter Soldier.
Why wouldn't Sam Altman be doing that right now? Like, if he has access to,
he probably doesn't have that
powerful
kind of data on everybody. Yeah. That's so funny. That is literally the plot of Captain America: Winter Soldier. Hydra makes an AI bot to read everybody's Amazon purchases and posts and all the things to find out who's a threat to Hydra, and they're gonna, do the helicarrier and just take them all out.
Do you think that's happening?
No. I don't know, man. Sometimes these Hollywood movies, I'm like, what do you know that I don't know?
Yeah.
I'm sure there are governments in the world that would like to do that.
All right. Do we got any chats? Before we move to the next topic? Like I said, for anyone who wasn't here, we take chats in between episode segments. Our boy Hampson's still in the chat. Let's go, boy. Dragon's Truth has been active. What's up, dude?
Dragon's Truth. Dragon's
Once
Tooth?
it becomes the Tower of Babel, that's when it's scary.
Dude, it already is the Tower of Babel.
Is it?
I don't know. I was just saying that to be dramatic.
No. One thing is true. Like, and we're working on translator stuff right now. Like, we're about to be able to talk to everybody, like, fluently, like, in every language. Like, that's actually happening in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is possible right now, theoretically, but it's still not to the bandwidth speed that it needs to be. And once you figure out the kind of how you implement that in normal human interaction, like, is it on glasses and you're reading it, or is it an earpiece, but that kind of gets in the way, or is it you're just holding a phone and it's back and forth? We can already do that, and it's getting better.
Yeah, we can already do that.
But at what point does it just become you speak and I don't even, like, in real time it's translating every single word?
Well, that's kind of like how the UN headphones work, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Is that a big deal? It sounds like Tower of Babel, where it's like one unified language.
I don't know. I think the Tower of Babel is about more than that.
Right.
I think it's about a lot worse and a lot more than that.
But at least that's one step towards a scenario like that, right?
Maybe.
Is being able to talk to everybody.
Well, I just remember that language is the judgment. It's not like... It is part of the problem, you know? But it's also the judgment.
But God scattered the language.
Right.
Yeah, but that's just weird that we're circumventing that now.
Yeah.
It's right back
That's
around.
True. That's part of it, yeah.
Anyway.
Well,
Gerald's here.
maybe let's say this.
What's up?
When it becomes the Tower of Babel, to me, would be more like on a national or societal scale, people are inviting beings to inhabit AI. If a company went out
and said, we're going to use this technology to access the spiritual realm.
Let's say the spiritual realm, or we believe that aliens...
Is there any companies trying this right now? Oh my gosh.
That would...
Oh my gosh.
That really is...
We need to pray.
That's what I think the Tower of Babel really means, is that.
Trying to circumvent the curse.
Mm-hmm.
Access demonic power.
Mm-hmm.
Man, through technology?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. That's what the Tower of Babel is. That's what a ziggurat, that's what a pyramid is. It is technology to access spiritual power.
All right. Shall we move forward?
We shall.
This topic is, should churches be run like a business?
It's another one that we hit a lot.
This is a clip from Ruslan, KD, interviewing his local church pastor, which I think it's cool that they have this kind of friendship, you know, and that Ruslan's involved in his local church. He talks about that a lot. I feel like his pastor said some pretty good, insightful things, especially from where I sit in a parachurch ministry. You know, we're not a church, but we operate as a ministry, and we have a lot of business principles that we follow. Mm-hmm. But we also have a lot of business principles that we don't follow for the sake of preserving relationship and basically reminding people that the most valuable thing that we have is relationship. And even with this show, like, there's so many topics or things that we could push for that's going to grow our market value, right? That we don't do. Yep. Because, I don't know, we feel like it's the relationships formed through this are more important. Even the type of people that you attract in the world of maximize likes, views, everything, maximize church attendance, I tend to take a step back. I do think he has some valuable things to say to this point, and that there is a way that you should go about running an organization with excellence and thinking about it in a way where, like, obviously he has a pretty distinct gift of, I don't know what gift you would say, but like organizational, like God is using these things. And I think that's one thing that I've learned and we've talked about is that, one person with a certain type of gifting that's maybe like a prayer warrior or someone that is an intercedes, like our grandmothers, right? May look at someone who is is talking about money all the time, but that person may just be like, that may be the thing that God gifted them with to serve the church with.
Right.
And they love the Lord, but they're talking about, hey, how do we do this and this and this? Because the fact is that even advancing the gospel takes finances, and it's not just in a bubble.
Well, you're saying everybody sees how their gift is valuable.
Right.
Everybody is very clear about how important their gift is. So the person whose gift is money sees how important money is and thinks that everybody should be thinking about money. And the person who sees how the person whose gift is organization and governments, that's the Bible word, sees how important organization and government is, and thinks that everybody should be thinking about organization and government.
Right.
And the person who sees how important prayer and mysticism and the prophetic is, thinks that everybody should be praying and have the prayer life that they have. But again, I'm just reading, I'm thinking through 1 Corinthians 12, all those gifts in 1 Corinthians 12. And the whole conversation is started in 1 Corinthians 12 with, now there are many members of the body, and we need them all. And no one is allowed to say, I don't need you. And no one is allowed to say, I'm not important.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we do need government people, and we do need prayer warriors, and we do need givers, and we do need teachers. And it is just important for each one of them to remember, I need everyone.
And we'll get into this, but it gets a lot harder, and I think, there's pros and cons to all of these stuff. But I just wanted to present this as a conversation that we could work through in real time. Take in this clip. You have an article that we're going to read through. But I do think this problem becomes more difficult when people separate because of giftings instead of being together and unified with a multitude of different kinds of gifts in one place. Right. And I think that's kind of what we need. So let's jump into this, and we'll get into the conversation after.
I might say something kind of controversial here, but I think that you do need to run a church like a business. And most churches that are reaching people and are being successful at it are running their churches like a business.
Now, what do you mean by that? Because people are going to get very upset. They're going to say business is all about profit margins and all this sort of stuff. What do you mean by a business?
What I mean is with clear systems, structures, oversight. When we think about, like, there are certain words that people get freaked out about. If you talk about in a church, like, we're trying to scale right now. People are like, businesses scale, churches don't. No, churches, we can just call it something different. But you're scaling, you're reaching more people. Just like in a business, you run a business so that you can produce more product to get more people buying your product, right? Same thing in church is we're trying to produce, like we're trying to have a really good product, which is, of course, the gospel, but we want to present it in a way which is honoring to God and excellent. And so that we can reach more people, right? And when I first got into ministry, I was like, bro, all you got to do is just pray and preach. And I quickly found out, when people get saved, what do we do with them?
Yep.
Because and like even in the early church, they realized that after a certain amount, it doesn't just happen organically. You have to have your seven, the choosing of the seven, to make sure that the widows are being distributed to, right? Like that's how you run successful business, I guess you would say. So, too many, I think the reason why a lot of churches aren't successful is because they run very mom and pa, like, we'll figure it out this week and we'll figure it out. In a business, you have somebody that keeps your books. You have somebody that is watching, okay, what is our profit margins? What are these things? And we're nonprofit. We don't get profit. If
there's an increase at the end of the year, you don't put that in your pocket.
No, dude, if Rhythm Church disappears tomorrow or gets shut down, like, it's not like we get rich from it.
Right.
You know what I mean? That money has to go into other nonprofits.
Right. Right.
You know, or there's major legal issues that happen. Like,
so what do you think about all that so far? What he's saying about, like,
he's right.
Yeah.
I think he's absolutely right in that if you make things clean, if you make things accountable, if you make systems easy to navigate, you make systems easily accessible, things will, like, people want institutions that will help them, right? I mean, think about calling the police. It's like 911. Boom.
Right.
You got the police on the phone.
Works.
You know exactly what to do. And they walk you through, tell me where you are. Tell me what's wrong. I've had to call the police a couple times in my neighborhood.
Recently? Oh my gosh. What happened?
Oh, we were driving down the street and there's a girl, probably about 9 years old. It was 10 o'clock at night.
Walking around?
With a baby on her hip.
Oh no.
Just walking down the road. And my wife said, should we call the police? I said, yes, we should call the police.
Yeah.
But so that's the thing. You have this institution that's easy to navigate, really accessible, and will help you navigate it and make the right decisions. And it works. It functions.
But
then you have institutions where, think about, I don't know how many people have been in a situation like this, but it's like, it's really hard to get a hold of my boss. It's really hard to get a hold of my pastor. I get a hold of my pastor, I get a hold of my landlord, and they don't do anything about what I said. And where did my complaint go? And it feels like I just blew it off into the wind, and now it's all gone. And what's happening with the finances? And what's happening with the,
right.
What happened to all that stuff that we did on Easter? What happened to that thing that you promised and said and you never delivered? And yeah, dysfunction like that, people are like, I'm out. They might stay around a while for relationships, but when systems are dysfunctional like that, systems that work, people want to be around it and participate in it. Systems that don't work, people do not want to be around it. So in that sense, do you want clean, accountable, easily navigatable systems so that people can enjoy and use the institution? Yes, absolutely.
What's the counter argument that you see?
The two things that I see would be, one, if the system, what does that institution do?
Right.
What are those systems made to do? What does church growth mean? And it's easy to get cynical and jaded and to look and say, like, oh, all churches ever want to do is grow numbers. They want to scale big, get more bodies in seats, get more tithe at the end of the year, get more campuses, more people, more services, more. Like, and so that's the thing is, in a business, more product, more customers, more scaling, more
is
inventory. Well, but that means more profit.
Right.
And profit ultimately is kind of the goal. Yeah. Like, you can say, like, I've got the best salsa in the world and I just want to share grandma's recipe of the salsa with everyone.
So everyone can enjoy it.
But if it doesn't pay the bills, you're not going to do it for very long.
Yeah.
From the goodness of your heart. At the end of the day, all of that scaling, like, is because it is going to make you more profit, more money. But like, more butts in seats, more tithe, more campuses, more services, more for what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
like,
it is
what are you producing?
It is so easy to get jaded because that for what a lot of times gets lost. And if the for what is to disciple people, and sometimes that just gets lost in the more.
Right.
Because disciple, and then here's the other, and then the two go together.
Because you have no mechanism for discipleship. Like, or wasn't as at the core of who you were.
Well, you are discipling an image of God to, this is from the book of Ephesians, grow into the fullness measured by the stature of Christ. Like, grow up into a man.
Yeah.
Okay, when am I done growing up into a man? Well, the measurement is the fullness of the stature of Christ. Okay, so I'm never going to be done growing up. Exactly. And to say, like, that kind of depth of growth and relationship, because the depth can get so deep, to go more that way is going to not end up looking like more in a lot of other ways. You know, if you do 4 services and you're running 2,000 people every weekend, how hard is it going to be to go that deep? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know? And so one, it's like there are different kinds of growth, and to balance and focus on each one, right, is part of the task, is not just to grow in one direction, but to grow in multiple directions. And I think a talented and spiritually minded pastor can really do that. But then that's number 2, where the pastor at the top becomes basically CEO.
Right.
And he is making sure that the systems run smoothly, and the soul of growing into the fullness of the stature of Christ is totally carved out of the middle. We're doing all, and again, it's like, okay, our systems are incredibly smooth, are incredibly clean, are incredibly whatever. For what? And there's a big for what in the middle of a hole in the middle of it. And
I guess it really comes down to the question of, and here's where our Catholic and Orthodox friends will jump in here and have a party with what we're talking about, because this is both of our problems. But what is the church for? Like, what are we doing? Like, what is doing church? Like, right. What is that? And then I had 2 questions with that, which is like, okay, this idea of discipleship, foreign to most people. I actually guarantee you that most people listening to this have no clear definition of what that means. Is that the same thing as friendship, or do you think that is reducing the idea of discipleship too much, or do you think that's a helpful term in our modern day culture of like, hey, are you actually, like, are people at your church actually having friendships that are effectual for Christ? Like, do people actually know each other in a way that iron sharpens iron? Because what I found with discipleship and what we've talked about is that it's not that complicated. It's just loving someone and being intentional to be their friend. Mm-hmm. And then God just kind of does the rest, you know? And so
I think discipleship,
you got any answers for that?
I think discipleship is not friendship. I do think that that's too reduced.
Right.
That's too reductionist. But it is helpful to point people in that direction, because discipleship is basically done through relationship. If you do discipleship from a stage or through a program or through an app, you are, it's like saying like, hey, meet my friend Bailey, and then I introduce them to your skeleton. You know, it's like, okay, it's the bones, it's the information that I need, but it's got none of the flesh on it. It's not alive.
Like, imagine if you were like, hey, we should hang out with my buddy Bailey sometimes. Y'all would really get along. And then all y'all did was go into your living room and put on Roku and go to the podcast. And it's like, here we go.
Yeah.
You know?
No, it's very true. You know, or
because that's the data though. Because that person, like, even, like, yes, we're transmitting it, and there is this real thing that's happening through our conversations. But at the end of the day, that's ones and zeros. It's not, that's being reproduced into sound data and color data and pixel data. It's not a real thing.
Yeah.
You know?
And, well, I'll say this. God gave the law, and it wasn't enough.
Mm.
God gave the prophets and his word, which Paul says is sufficient to make you wise unto salvation. It is sufficient to make you wise unto salvation, but apparently it wasn't enough. God came in flesh to make relationships, to make disciples, as a person to make disciples. So the central thing about discipleship is that it is done in relationship, and you cannot get away from that. So if the what for, if all these systems are to facilitate relationships between members, relationships between pastors and teachers and laity, between whatever, but if all that what for is circling around relationships, right, then discipleship is going to happen. Hopefully, there does have to be some intentionality behind it, but the church, ecclesia, means assembly. So the assembly, like he was saying, when the assembly gets together, at some point its growth and its size and its needs becomes so unwieldy that you need some strict lines and boundaries. And I think about, growing up, we had 4 kids and 1 bathroom and 2 sisters and 1 bathroom. If it was just me or just me and my 1 sister, which it was my older siblings grew up and left the house. So sometimes it was just me and my 1 sister, and it wasn't a big deal to share 1 bathroom. But when there were 4 people sharing 1 bathroom, it was like, we got to have some rules. We got to have some limits. You got to clean up after yourself when you're done. I don't want to come in with your makeup all over the countertop, Yeah. So at a certain size, there does need to be some rigidity, some systems, some rules, some structure to help things flow so that everybody can enjoy the institution. But still, at the basis of it, the ecclesia is the assembly. When the church gets together, the church is the people. It isn't just the institution. The institution can facilitate the people getting together and the discipleship happening, but those systems serve the people, not the people serving the system. And so both of those things seem to me like when the heart of the people and of the relationships gets carved out, the institution may be smooth, it may be great, and you need it, but you need it to serve that end. If it stops serving that end, things get gnarly. Yeah.
I don't know why my mind is thinking about the Catholic and Orthodox Church, and I'm just like,
I don't know why either.
Because I'm like wondering if this is just, it doesn't strike me as just a Protestant problem. Like this whole concept.
Right.
I think it seems like a whole societal problem.
I think Catholics would probably say they would totally disagree with me that the church is the institution, and it was established by Jesus himself, and the institution is the ark on which we all cling for refuge, and it does way more than just service the ecclesia.
Okay, so I know why I thought of this, because in preparing for this episode, you and I talked about that, which was like, okay, so what you talked about what keeps being brought up, and I'm like, I'm not so sure this is actually happening, but the idea that people are moving from the Protestant church to the Catholic and Orthodox, and it is like, what are they looking for? Because if they're not getting relationship over here, are they going to the institution hoping that will be the fix to the problem, but they're still not getting deep fellowship and friendship?
Well, okay, so part of the reason why I said that a Catholic would disagree with me is because my understanding from the outside would be a Catholic might say something more like the institution exists as Christ's representative on earth, like through which Christ gives himself in his grace, through the administration of communion, through the priesthood, through the Pope, through all the hierarchy and the bishops, through the liturgy. Like that is how we receive grace. And so the institution actually is the channel through which Christ comes. And at its heart, the blood red beating heart, I actually don't think that purpose is too different. That the institution becomes a channel through which Christ can come and mediate grace. I think that that's perfectly fine. And I think that if you wanted to say it in those words or have it in, I think that would serve a Protestant church very well. But so what I'm saying is, you want to replace the what for of relationship with, mediating Christ's grace, or however you would say it as a Catholic, or whatever you would say as an Orthodox, or whatever you would say as a Presbyterian, whatever. What I'm saying, the real problem is when the institution gets the what for carved out, when there is no what for, or the what for, even worse, God forbid, the what for becomes something like greed or something like fame or something like status, whatever.
Yeah.
But that a Christ-centered what for is either present or has been carved out. And that I think is the difference. And so I think when people jump ship to the Catholics is at their best, and I will say their representation online, well, never mind, I won't say that. They're not always bringing their best. There is a strong apologetic from those online. While they may not always represent themselves with charity, the ones who are the most zealous online do have that what for deeply rooted.
Yeah. But it just seems to be like you have these subgroups within the church, both in Protestant and all these other denominations, that are zealous followers of Jesus that want to bring the apologetic online. That's the outward representation. And then you have a similar old problem where it's like people just going through the motions.
Yeah.
You're able to show up, do the liturgy or go to the worship service.
Right.
Receive the information, walk out, and never interact with another soul.
Right. Which
is the I feel like, I don't know. And maybe that's just my Protestant mindset. It's like, I think that's the problem.
And I also think that it's our internet-based age.
Yeah.
So where you and I go to very small churches that don't have flashy light shows, that don't have great systems, that don't have the money to pay for great systems.
Yeah, and sometimes I wish maybe there was more.
Like his thing about the mom and pa, like it kind of feels like that.
But that's like that for me. I'm not saying that the flashy lights and stuff are bad, but for me it's just like a preferential thing. It doesn't actually matter.
Sure.
I'm just like, I'd like it more vibey in here. I want multiple light sources. Like,
I know the reason I'm where I'm at is because my friends are there.
Yeah, for
Their
sure.
relationships are there. And so same for you. I think when you don't have that, you will go to somewhere where the institution actually has a purpose and is serving that purpose. And so there's one. I also think that the representation online, which it just is where we interact with these things, the Catholic representation online is usually the most zealous and the most devoted. Without trying to be too critical, without trying to be too negative, a swath of the Protestant presentation online is kind of cheesy, kind of sell out. I can't judge their hearts, but I'm saying the presentation is not full of zeal, is not full of, it's a little bit silly, it's a little bit
There's
cheesy.
a lot to sift through there.
Yeah, I don't want to be too, the internet's a big place. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but.
And you got your little bubble.
But again, that's the perception that I'm being fed. So
yeah,
who can even say? But coming all the way back around, I agree with him. I think the church does need to have clear accountability, clear systems, easily navigatable, if you want to grow. But then grow into what?
Right.
To serve people, you do need your systems to work that way, to serve people and to serve them well.
Yeah, we get caught up on methodology, right? Where it's like, are you a big church? Are you a small church? Are you this? Are you that? And we have opinions around methodology of whether or not it's going to serve the particular ends. But I think what we need to be agreed on is what the ends are. Maybe your method does work to produce like a deep, rich faith in Jesus, right? Maybe the mega church does do that.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily the methodology. Is your methodology producing people who endure to the end?
Right. One thing that I have heard is a lot of pastors get capped at about 200 congregants. That's the limit for most pastors.
Like they can't grow beyond that. They just
their
church doesn't grow.
Even their church might grow beyond 200 for a little bit, and then it just
dips back down.
Yeah, it never cracks that ceiling, or at least not for long. But what's interesting is that 200 number, that is about the number of relationships that one person can handle. That is about the number of names, faces, connections, relationships that one person can kind of have in their bubble, in their sphere. Okay, this is my tribe, this is my crew. 150 is about the maximum of that, and then you just tap out. And so what I have heard is the reason why pastors get capped at 200 is because they never create a system. It is literally all those relationships are resting on their shoulders alone. And that is the max number of people that can be taken care of by one single person.
And I guess that's the evangelical question, right? Is that what we want to happen? Like do we need to get beyond 200? The evangelical, right? The idea is the more the better, right?
That is a legitimate question.
Yeah.
That is a legitimate question. That's a good question to ask. Do we need to grow beyond 200? Now, I will also say this. There are other reasons to have good systems in place.
Right.
Like, okay, practically, can I be close to my pastor? 200 people kind of feels sort of small, but even if 200 people, could I really be close to my pastor? Even at 100 people, could I really be close to my pastor?
Yeah.
Or anyone spiritually mature in my church? How do I get connected to the same thing I said about calling 911? It's like 911, boom, I've got the police. It's like if I need a spiritual mentor, if I want to be around somebody who can disciple me, who can help me grow, who I can form a relationship with, who I can glean wisdom from, the system to get me to that person, you know what I mean? There's a need for a system that can get me to that person. That would be really helpful. That would be really great. And I think as you build structures, as you build lanes, as you build systems, people will flood in to use those systems that are built well. So
like leadership.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing.
Hey, here's some leaders. If you want prayer, go.
Well, and there you go. And so immediately by doing that, you have taken the burden of the 150 off of the pastor and distributed it.
Yeah.
And you are setting yourself up for growth. And you're making good systems that people will want to come in and to use because you've built nice, clean, accountable, navigatable roads. People will drive on them.
It's the whole the whole conversation of hierarchy and authority that we're having, which is like, I naturally tend towards hierarchy being bad, right? Where I'm like, okay, when you create a leader, does that now make it to where the majority of people aren't taking responsibility? It's like, oh, that's what the leaders do. They go out and evangelize, but I'm just a part, I'm just a part of it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, how do you avoid doing that? Is that a bad version of hierarchy where you like create separation between people?
Well, again, for what?
Yeah.
If I've got pastor on top and a team of elders, if their job is what is their job? For what? You know what I mean? If their job is to keep the systems running, then they can do a really good job of that. And nobody down here may ever get involved. But if their job is to constantly be finding new leaders, Like Moses, bro, in that thing in Exodus, Moses breaks down the Israelites. He's like leaders of thousands and leaders of hundreds and leaders of 10. He gets all the way down to appointing judges for 10 people. That's like a small group. That's like barely a family, you know?
Yeah.
In those days.
It's Bitcoin, bro. It's decentralization, dog.
Oh my gosh. But truly, you know, their what for, you can have a what for where every stage of leader is to create a leader underneath them, to raise up, to fill their seat.
Or even better, flip that. The whole congregation is at the top. The pastor is at the bottom, lifting up and supporting the elders, and the elders are lifting up and supporting the leaders that are.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the expectation, right? You're laying your life down.
Right. That is true.
So, but I think too many times it is that other way around, and it's easy to see it that way.
Yeah.
Be like, I am at the top.
Yeah.
I have the last say.
So I think what's interesting about what he's saying is, if you truly do build great systems, you almost can't help but grow. I had a pastor who used to say, God will break every net. God breaks every net he fills.
Okay.
I don't know, I don't know if that was true or that was just something he said, but at least basically like the system that you build, God will, like, it will be full. And you look at your system right now and how full it is. Your system is built to contain what's in it. And if you build it bigger, it will probably fill up to that bigger size. So if you think it through that lens, like truly your system is built to contain the size that it contains, which is like what we were saying about being capped at 200. That's a legitimate question. Do I want to build a bigger system to get bigger than this?
Yeah, and I think that's where that kind of entrepreneurship mindset, because of course you should want a bigger company. Yeah. Of course, right?
Of course.
Like you want to grow bigger, more profit, more is better.
Well, more souls, more people in the kingdom, more lives changed, more marriages saved.
Which makes sense.
Of course you do.
But it's like, the question then is, and this is what I've been thinking about, but then can you do that well at scale? And it's like, is it better to, at 200, to be seeing lives actually being changed and that going 100 years down the road or 50 years down the road? Or is it better to do it at scale and it lasts 10 years? I guess you just have to do the math on it. Right?
No. I think you're right about decentralized.
There's a qualitative thing.
We have said this before. We've said this many times before. You could have a church that runs 2,000 on a weekend, and there's 200 leaders, which would be 10 to 1.
Yeah.
Or let's even say a church of 3,000, and that's, if you had 150 people to 1, what would that be? Oh gosh, 20. So 20 staff members in a church of 3,000. That's 150 to 1. My point being, in a church of 3,000 with 20 staff members, you could still have a 1 to 150 ratio.
Yeah.
Like that kind of relational ratio. So, or you could,
you distributed it well.
If your systems were built to get those people to relationships.
And if you had, see, that's what I was thinking of, because like I don't think there's anything wrong with large worship and public Bible reading, right? There's nothing wrong with that.
The apostles would meet together with all the disciples, which numbered in the thousands, in the temple.
Yes.
They would do it in public.
The Jewish temple. Yeah. And my whole thought is like, okay, if you can do that, if like the church that I started at, our whole thing was we're life groups that gather together.
Right.
We're not a church that breaks up into life groups. We are life groups that gather together. And I think if you can instill that mindset to where, like, I remember for us, we were so excited to split the life group in half and have to start another one in a new house. And it was like, oh yeah, that's what we do. And then we gather together. But really the life on life stuff is happening in these homes.
Right.
It's like,
and I'm sure that there were vetting processes for life group leaders, that there was curriculum, that there was trainings, that there were systems to make that happen. And those systems did not happen at the life group level. They happened at the church level.
Yeah. And we call it life groups, but it could be seen as churches, right? Like if you were just calling it churches instead, and you just church planted at another house church, and you just called it that, it's kind of the same thing, right?
So Paul writes his letter to the Corinthians, to the churches in Corinth. And he says somewhere in the letter, he goes, I have heard from Chloe's people. So it does seem almost as though he knew that there were groups of house churches. One of these house churches might have met in somebody named Chloe's house. But he wrote the letter to all the churches in Corinth, that all these little house churches were supposed to get together to read this message. So it does seem like almost exactly what you're describing, of a bunch of little house churches, maybe 30 to 40 people max, who made up the Corinthian church across the city. And they got together and recognized themselves as the Corinthian church corporately, but meeting in little house churches around.
Bro, that sounds so sick. I know there's problems in the Church of Corinth, but
there are a lot of problems in the Church of Corinth.
But it sounds cool.
So yeah, the institution. So what I'm saying is the institution to organize those life groups in your scenario was very necessary, because it was the thing that supported and set up and sustained the system that was the life groups, that enabled that rapid radical growth,
Yeah.
And instilled that culture in all of them corporately. So, but the what for of those systems and of that institution was the life that happened in the life group, and the discipleship and the relationship that happened in the life group. And they built that system to function, to generate that.
And why is that relationship valuable? Like, is it just because, like, the natural outflow of that relationship? Like, for people that haven't experienced what we're talking about, like, what does that life and life do? I mean, obviously, there's a component of what we're meant to be together as humans, right?
Yeah.
But what does it produce? Like, is it, like, obviously, if you spent time with bad people for long enough,
yeah,
it turns you into a bad person, right? And so I'm sure what goes on in these house churches matters.
Well, I'll tell you a little story. We had a family over a week or two ago, and my daughter was being disobedient. I had told her to get her PJs on over and over, and I snapped, and I brought out the dad voice, and I glared at her and gave her the laser beam eyes. I was like, you get your pajamas on right now. I've asked you several times, do it now. And the other dad looked over at me. He was like, oh, you have a dad voice. And he goes, okay. He's like, I'm not totally screwing up as a dad.
Wow.
Like, you also snap at your children and bust out your dad voice. And it was like, could I have handled that moment more graciously and more godlyly? Sure. Maybe. But for him to see me in my own home, living with my children, I could have told him, like, oh, yes, I speak to my children this way. Or maybe I would have put on a Christian mask and be like, oh, I'm always kind to my children, but I struggle sometimes, brother, with my anger. The most impactful thing was for him to be in my home and watch me correct my child. That just, you cannot replace that. You can't replace that. You can't replace that with a Bible teaching. You can't replace that with a sermon. You can't replace that with anything. A real human interaction, watching somebody live out the gospel, you cannot replace it. And again, that's why Jesus came to earth, to live out the kingdom with his disciples. He didn't do it in the law. You couldn't do it through the law. He didn't do it through the prophets. You couldn't do it through the prophets. You could only do it by coming and living and doing it with them. So, like I said before, just to do discipleship through an app, through a program, through a sermon series, from a stage, it's like being introduced to the skeleton of something. You have to see it with flesh on it. You have to see it in its living room and eat with it at the dinner table. Like that's how people really grow and really transform and really learn. So,
amen. And I hope we do at least a decent job through the online internet interwebs of representing
but again,
one of those scenarios.
We have said many times, and I'll say it now again to you, viewer. We have prayed these last couple weeks, like, Lord, through this ministry online, would you bring us a friend?
Yeah.
Because we have a ministry of a creative team of people who, use their creative gifts to advance the gospel?
Yes. Advance the gospel through creativity and technology.
So if you would like to hang out with us and be a part of that discipleship team and learn how to use creative gifts to advance the gospel, you can go to divinecreative.org and sign up to be a part of our team and be in relationship and learn to use creative gifts with other people who are trying to do that same thing too.
Board member Michael Weidman.
That's why we do this. We don't do this just for fun.
Yeah.
And we don't do this just to minister through our voices, but that ultimately there would be a system, a pipeline in place to connect people to relationship.
Yeah.
To do what we're doing in relationship.
Hampson says you guys do a great job.
Oh,
thanks, Hampson. Yeah. And we're trying our best to figure out how to create that pipeline.
Yeah.
But yeah, and sometimes, it's tough sometimes to show up here every week and cover all these topics, have these conversations.
Yeah, you may be
diligent.
You may be watching this, at the gym or in your car or whatever, but real time, it's late at night.
Yeah.
It ain't easy.
Should we take any chats? Did you want to bring up that article at all, or is that a whole nother conversation?
It's tangential.
Okay. Did you want to talk about it, or
no? I think we covered it. I think we
Frank
covered the
Perez,
base.
What's up, Gerald? And it's crazy because I feel like all of these guys in here are actual friends.
Exactly.
Like getting to know Hampson. We know Frank, Gerald. What's up?
Devin's been in here before.
If you like our show, say what's up in the chat. Like literally just say what's up. What's WASSUP. What's up? What's up? How you doing, Victoria? You got anything to add? I want to hear you say something. Nothing? You want to stay off the camera? Nice. Well, hey, y'all throw some chats out here or we're gonna get off. That's a threat.
Hey, we covered our favorite topics: discipleship, AI, Catholicism. All we're missing is apologetics.
Flat Earth.
And it would have been a
we missed Flat Earth.
Yeah, we did miss Flat Earth.
I wanted to talk about Flat Earth. Oh, Gerald said, what's up? Gerald's probably the oldest guy in here, man. And he's saying what's up. And y'all aren't.
Gerald has an online ministry.
There's Hampson. What's up? He does have an online ministry.
Hey,
Gerald's on the show. Y'all should go watch
Prayer at the Curb.
Yeah, go check out Prayer at the Curb. He has a YouTube channel. He's on Facebook. Gerald Pinch, Prayer at the Curb. You should watch the episode we did with him. We did a near-death experience episode with Gerald.
Amazing.
In person.
One of my favorites.
It was awesome. That's actually what our friend's grandmother said. She really enjoyed that episode. So
wow. Hey, you're touching lives, Gerald.
Gerald says, "What does a Christian look like?"
Wow.
They must be Hispanic. No, but or Chinese.
What does a Christian look like?
What does a Christian look like? I don't know.
Could I direct you, please, now to
Gerald says nice.
Galatians chapter 5.
Sorry, I'm joking too much. Galatians chapter 5.
Galatians chapter 5.
Thank you for the great question, Gerald. What does a Christian look like?
A Christian can recite the 5 points of Calvinism.
Bro, stop.
A Christian partakes of a valid
Gerald
Eucharist.
Said he did a video today.
No, all the way at the bottom.
Bro, I thought our Eucharist video was going to do way better than it did. Like, I thought that was a fire thumbnail.
Here you go. If you are a true Christian and you have the Spirit inside of you, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Those who are Christ's have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live in the Spirit, let us walk in the Spirit.
You know, I love that.
That's what a Christian looks like.
I love that part that says, against such there is no law.
Yeah, the part that I skipped.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Isn't it? What's interesting about it?
I don't know. Is the word law there Torah? Or is that just like there's no...
Well, it's Greek, so no, not Torah, but
okay.
Nomos, I think. Yeah.
That's cool.
Well, okay, if you scroll up, he's talking about love. Love is the fulfillment of the law.
And the opposite of...
the opposite of a Christian.
Now the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambition, dissensions, heresies, envy, murderers, drunkenness. What is that?
Revelries. It's like parties.
And the like, of which I tell you beforehand, just as I told you in the past, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God.
Man.
Bro, that's like a lot of stuff.
Those who practice selfish ambition will not inherit the kingdom of God.
Oh, no.
Wow.
Hampson asked, why did God allow the snake in the garden?
What do you mean?
He asked, why did God allow the snake in the garden? That's why I said, oh, no, because it's a whole can of worms. We have an episode kind of on that, right?
Yeah, we do. Mm-hmm. I think... I don't know. I have a couple answers. Do you have any answers?
I think, I don't know. Maybe it's pretty simple. It's like the snake was a seraphim. That's a spiritual being. Spiritual beings are supposed to be good. God gave them the ability to rebel if they wanted to, so there would be free will.
Yeah.
And it chose to sow deceit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Why was Bathsheba allowed on the roof? You know?
Right.
Why didn't an angel come and tell Abel, don't go in the field with Cain? I mean, for all of those answers, there's a couple of things. And at least one of them is like, that's where the snake belonged. Like bathing on a roof is, I don't know, maybe that's weird. I don't know. I think it probably is pretty weird.
At the time, I don't know, man. Today it definitely is nowadays.
But that's where the snake belonged. And And number two, I think, and this is the big thing with, especially like with the David analogy, is Adam was sufficient. Adam had the law. Adam knew what he was supposed to do, and he just didn't. David knew what he was supposed to do, and he just didn't. So, let's say like you've been training in some sport. My dad was my baseball coach. And then let's say...
Bro, he was in the comments like a couple days ago.
He did.
I was like,
he wrote a
let's
book.
go.
He wrote a novel in there. Let's say my dad, I've been training, I've been working so hard, and then my dad's like, no, I'm not going to put you in the baseball lineup. Like, no, I'm going to put you in left field where the ball never goes. What he's telling me is, like, I don't trust you. You're not sufficient. You're not good enough. You can't pass the test. And I think that what God was telling Adam was, you have enough. You can pass the test. And he didn't. The essence of sin is that you choose to do it.
You choose, yeah.
It's not that it overcomes you. And that's what God tells Cain. It will overcome you if you let it. He says, watch out. It is crouching at your door. It wants to overcome you.
Yeah.
But if you want to, you can do well. Don't you know you will be accepted if you do what is good?
Yeah.
You can. You just don't want to.
Frank asks, do you think the garden is a physical place here on earth?
What do you think?
Yes.
Really?
Of course. Because, like, Genesis talks about specific rivers that flow from it, right?
Right. But those rivers went to Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, and Jerusalem. So
okay.
Geographically, there is no way for that to make sense.
But wasn't there like some Expedition Bible video where he potentially found the place where they come together?
Unfortunately, what the Bible says is that those rivers come out from Eden and go to all those places. Whereas the river he was looking at all came together in a confluence. So
what do you think?
I think it probably was a real place. But the earth has been so transmogrified by the flood. I don't think that's a real word, but it has been so terraformed.
I'm gonna start using that word. Transmogrified.
The earth has been so terraformed by the flood that
it changed it.
Yeah, there's no way that you could ever find it. It's certainly not in Missouri.
So we were talking about this today that we've been in the Euphrates on a boat.
You have?
Yes. And I'm like, in a place, I don't know if I can say where it's at specifically, but it's a tiny little place that you've never heard of along the Euphrates. And I'm like, man, the garden could have been here. It's so freaking beautiful.
Wow.
Like, it's not one of those places where you're like, yeah, if I want a vacation, I'm going to, like Lake Como and, Italy or whatever. Like, that's beautiful. And like what you think of. It's like one of those places, but you never have heard of it. Wow. It's in the middle of nowhere. And you're like, what the?
Yeah.
And apparently there's like Red Bull athletes that go there and do base jumping off the mountains.
Come on.
So
that's what me and my kids watch before we start our movie night.
Base jumping videos.
Yeah.
Like wingsuit or like, okay, dude, wingsuit.
We'll watch all kinds of Red Bull videos. We'll watch like skiing. Yes. We'll watch longboarding. We'll watch base jumping.
You're ruining Kai. Like, I've told you, I prophesied. Not really. But I've been saying Kai, his son, and I don't know if I should have, whatever. But said your son's name. I don't know. But that he would be an extreme sports athlete. I'm like convinced.
Yeah. So what happens is we set up our projector, we set up the whole thing, and then while the kids are getting settled and getting their PJs on, I'll put some kind of sports or Red Bull or something. I think last week I put like primitive technology Like,
where they're building out
building
the shelters.
random stuff.
Dude,
like there's no
those are
talking, there's
so
no nothing.
cool.
It's just like building stuff
I
in the
love
wilderness.
those.
All of it. My daughter, she
loves
loved
those.
that.
I can see
she
that.
was like, "Can we watch that building stuff video again?" And then my son wanted to watch the sports.
That's hilarious.
He was like, "Do the longboarding."
Wait, like longboarding down the hill?
Uh-huh.
Dude, those guys are nuts.
He was getting up to 60 miles an hour, and there were cars coming the other way
no,
too.
Man. Like, if there's a few of those extreme sports that you just don't want to do, and that's one of them. Another one is like big wave surfing. You probably want to stay clear of that.
I don't want to do base jumping. That's so the wingsuit stuff.
It is dangerous, but if you go out of a plane, it's not that dangerous. If you go off of a mountain, very dangerous because a little bit of wind, you smack right into the thing. Hampson says, would be cool to do a study on water in the Bible. Waters came from Eden and the seas are gone in the end.
Bro.
So many references to water in the Bible.
The Bible Project already did it.
That is true.
Go find the Bible Project. They're way ahead of you, bro.
Bible Project is sick.
All right. Ready to sign off?
Frank said, get him into kart racing. So one day he can race Formula One Red Bull.
Yes.
That's true. That's actually That's where you can make money, right? If you
Formula One? Yeah, dude. Oh yeah, you make crazy money in that. All right.
Well, you want to do our little outro?
Yes. If you like what you saw, hit the like button. If you want to see more of us, please hit the subscribe button. If you disagree with something we said, put it in the comments. If you are a creative Christian and you would like to use your gifts to advance the gospel, go to divinecreative.org. Reach out to us. We'd love to get in touch with you and help you use your creative gifts to advance the gospel. Would you pray for us?
Yeah. Thank you, Father, for giving us the privilege just to have breath today and all of your provision for us to live, God. I just pray over everyone watching right now that you would speak to them, that you would help lead them to more truth, to more refinement of character, to laying down sin in their life, Lord Jesus. And I'm grateful for every single person that you've placed into our lives. Thank you, Lord.